We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. Did you see Captain Marvel? I saw Captain Marvel.
my 15-year-old son went out with some friends. Now, you're like, what's the big deal? My 15-year-old son is extreme introvert, and he does not do anything with anybody ever. Like if he had his perfect summer vacation is sitting here reading.
Okay.
all summer long. Like a little bit of housework, so he keeps his parents off his back, and then reading all summer long. So he made plans with his friends. They were all supposed to go see some movie called Arctic.
I do not know.
I have no idea what this movie is.
I'm not familiar with that.
They were going to go see this movie, but then it's already out of theater, so I was like, well, why don't you guys see Captain Marvel? Because it's not lame. And he said he really liked it. He said that he said that the plot moved a little fast for him.
Really?
Yeah, that it was a little rushed, but it was funny and it was and he had a good time.
Okay.
So
yeah,
what did you think?
It's for me, I think it's sort of in the middle of the pack of all the Marvel movies. You know, definitely not my favorite, but not my least favorite. It's like it's good. I didn't think it was like as awesome as I was hoping it would be, I guess.
Yeah, it's very hard to be as awesome as you were hoping it was going to be.
It's tough to be as awesome as I was hoping it would be. But yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, my thing is I felt like it was always a little bit subdued. It was always a little bit smaller, a little bit not, quite as grand.
Well, after seeing Infinity War.
And it is tough to live up to Infinity War. And then trying to be like bigger than Ant-Man, because Ant-Man did the smart thing of like we're not even close to being like the whole world is at stake. It's like this is a very small little contained show. It's Ant-Man, and that's like the polar opposite, so it really works. But then Captain Marvel's kind of be like, well, we are talking about aliens on a pretty grand scale, but we don't want to be as big as an Avengers movie. So yeah, it all felt a little contained for me.
Okay. My son said he liked it about the same as Infinity War, but not as much as Captain America Civil War. Which I say, Captain America Civil War wasn't as good as Infinity War, so what's wrong with you, weirdo? But, he's my son, so I can't say that.
That is right. There are wrongs and rights in opinions. You can only be one or the other. But.
You can only be one or the other. You cannot be both. So it is spring break here, so two of my sons are out in the other room being told not to use the internet at all so that I can stream this stupid podcast. And so they're like, what do you mean I can't listen to music? I'm like, yeah, you can't listen to music. They're probably listening to music, completely ignoring me, but whatever. So this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You go to www.avrant.com, leave us a comment there, facebook.com/avrantpodcast, youtube.com/avrant, until YouTube disables all comments because the advertisers, which is going to happen, I'm telling you.
Or I just set everything to no comments because I'm getting tired of muting dumb people.
That's fine.
So that one person can comment nicely.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of comments. I haven't really looked, but I saw a couple of comments, and it's like we had a comment on the website recently that's like slamming some interview Gene did on this podcast like 10 years ago.
Oh, there was something. Yeah, they were like talking directly to Clint. I'm like, good luck on him seeing that comment.
It's just like whatever. All right,
people are weird on the internet, man.
Yeah,
people are
strange. Dates, guys. Dates. Look at the date of something before you start posting
on the internet. That means it's relevant because I'm seeing it now.
That's right. Wait a second. This is the first I've heard of such a thing. I'm outraged. Welcome to 10 years ago, dude.
Oh, dear.
Things have changed around here. You can contact us directly. Rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is @FirstReflect. I'm Tom @avrant.com. My Twitter is @avrant_Tom. As you know, we are having our Philips Hue giveaway, and from our listener James, who has kindly supplied that. So we have a whole bunch of people who are entered. Rob, do you want to go through the list? Now, you may not have wanted to be entered, but because of PayPal, only one person on PayPal told it, basically it had some sort of note that said I want to be entered, and
right. I did get emails. I wrote down all the people who mentioned in an email as we requested, which is awesome. But we're like, you know what? I bet some of these other people also wanted to be entered.
Right. So yes. We're entering all of you.
Okay.
and if the shipping doesn't work out or you don't want it, just let us know. I'll pick somebody else.
Exactly. Yeah. That's
right. Everybody's getting entered for right now. So you wanna list them all?
Yeah, sure. So we are repeating the names from last week because they are entered. So that is Travis, Mark, Gary, and Juan. And then we got donations from Jonathan, Steve, Todd, Bastian, Matt F, Matt C, Kris, Yannick, John, Brandon, Peter, and Vincent. So thank you all very, very much for the donations, first and foremost, because we super appreciate that. And then thank you very much to James again. He likes his, we at one point long ago mentioned a nickname of House of Cards, and he's like, I want a nickname. So James House of Cards, there you go. Thank you very much for creating this whole thing for these Philips Hue bulbs.
Why would you want it? What? House of Cards?
I don't know, dude. He wants it. It's all right. Doesn't have to be in reference to, you know, the Netflix show, which now doesn't have such a sterling reputation.
I was going to say, are you sure? James, we're going to give you a do-over on that one. All right, so using a random number generator, I have given everybody a number in order that you came in.
Yes.
So Travis was number 1 and Vincent was at the end there.
Gotcha.
So I have put in the random number, and we are now... And I use random.org in case anybody wants to look it up. It's a true random number generator, supposedly. Who really knows? It's supposed to use atmospheric conditions in some random place in order to generate this number. So you ready for the drum roll?
Yeah.
The winner of the Philips Hue 2-bulb set is Todd.
Todd! Congratulations, Todd.
But we did reach $200.
Yes,
so we will generate a new random number, and that will be...
I think James was planning to give it to the same person, but...
Oh, we're going to give it to the same person?
Yeah.
Todd, you get them both! Yay!
Amazon Echo Dot there as well. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that was supposed to be the idea as far as I know. Sorry for everyone who was like holding their breath for a moment there.
Oh, I thought that was... Hey, I was as confused as...
No, because he said he'd throw it in as well, so I don't think he wants to ship it to two different
people? That's fine.
Like
okay,
so you get there.
You get both, buddy. So congratulations, Todd, to everybody else. Also, thank you for your donations. We very much appreciate it. And
so how's this working? Are we reaching out to Todd, or is Todd reaching back to us? Because we got to put Todd in touch with James is the whole thing. Because James is the one shipping it directly to you, Todd.
I might have Todd's
because he donated PayPal, so
I should be able to send it. I would like Todd to reach out to us and say, yes, I do in fact want these
that
things.
Would be even better. Todd, if you're hearing this, it will not hurt in any way, and we will appreciate if you reach out to us via email, question@avrant.com. So yeah, send that on in to us, Todd. We'll put you in touch with James, but we'll try to reach out to you, but don't count on us because, you know, it's us.
Yeah. There's that. Hold on a second here. I'm going to scroll. Scroll. There he is. Okay.
So such a good idea to do it all on the air.
It's live.
It is live.
I do have a shipping address, and it is in the United States. So
that's because I know some of those people were outside of the United States, but James had the opportunity for 2 weeks. He never said a darn thing about not being willing to ship it outside of the U.S., even though it might not work for someone else's electrical plug. We're not sure. I mean, the bulbs might, but there's the little Hue thingy, like the little hub thingy. That's got to plug into something.
Well, usually those things
might not play so nice.
No, usually those things are universal. The small gadgets.
Usually. But you never know. But it doesn't matter. Todd appears to be in the U.S., so it's all working out just fine.
All right. Thank you, all of those people, and also James for. There you go.
Yeah, that was great. That was awesome. Thank you all so much.
And we want to thank our 84 patrons over at Patreon.com. Patreon is a service where you can sign up to give us a monthly donation that comes out of your account and comes to us or other creators, content creators that you enjoy online. So thank you to our 84 patrons.
Yeah, that's patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you'd like to sign up, you can think of it like a voluntary subscription because it's automatic monthly donation, any amount you choose. So 84 patrons over there. Thank you so much.
Well, in NPR, they call them what? The continuing
ongoing
supporters or something like that. Yeah, that's what you could be for us. We also want to thank Joe. Joe went to Outdoor Speaker Depot and he bought $800 worth of speakers. Dude, I don't even know
over $800.
How do you do that? I mean, that's a lot of speakers.
Well, he was outfitting apparently like a whole office.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was like dozens of speakers and
Nice.
piles of speaker wire and amplifiers. And yeah.
So anyways, he let them know it was because of us, and that was probably their biggest order they had that week. So yay!
You never know. But yeah,
So
no, that's
talking this
awesome.
up to
Thank you,
yeah, talking
Joe,
this
for
up.
talking this up.
Yeah, talking this up is always a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Some news here. CalMAN Home will release in 4 different versions in April, priced at $145. There are specific versions for LG, Panasonic, Samsung, and Sony. AutoCal is supported in every version, but only LG and Panasonic TVs include built-in test pattern generators. You still need a measurement meter of some kind, with the cheapest supported model being around $150. Although CalMAN's own C6 HDR 2000 meter with full HDR support is close to $800. So talk about like 5 years late.
I mean, I am betting that if you want to do an entire CalMAN calibration yourself, you probably want to do HDR, so you're gonna need a pretty darn good meter for that to work. But still, all things considered, the software price is much lower. I'm a little disappointed that they're like you have to get the specific version for your branded TV, because what if you have one Sony and one LG in your house? Well, you got to buy both brands of the software for close to $300 for 2 separate versions. So, but there you go. That's what they're doing. Cool to see those pattern generators built into LG and Panasonic. That'll help. Otherwise, you need a pattern generator or at least a disc with patterns on it to plug into a Samsung or a Sony at the moment. But we'll see. They can always update stuff. Maybe they'll add pattern stuff to theirs too. Who knows? But
Who knows?
Good advancements. Good on you, AutoCal.
All right, contradicting what Rob predicted, Disney CEO Bob Iger explicitly said that soon after the Disney Plus streaming service launches this year, it will include the entire Disney and Pixar motion picture library, doing away with the Disney Vault. So there will not be Disney Vaults, as Rob thought there might be.
I thought for sure. I bet if they're super successful, it'll come back in the future. I'm still predicting, because they love that whole Vault idea. They love taking stuff away from their customers. But yeah, no, I mean they want this to work. They want Disney Plus to work. So
that's true, but I don't necessarily. Okay, now as much as I understand your disdain for the Disney Vault, this idea I've never really hated the Disney Vault. I've never really had a negative opinion of it. Yes, I understand, it's sort of forced supply and demand sort of thing that you don't really need to do. But at the same time, it essentially, you get through it makes it so from their end, they're getting like a steady revenue stream. Oh, we put this out this year, for this number of months.
Yeah, it draws attention when the release comes back. Right. But at the same time,
it's something for them to announce, like whenever they want on those in between when they're actually releasing brand new movies, they have something to announce that keeps the news cycle on them. I don't hate it. But I do agree that
if there's a streaming service and they're all going to be there, not right on launch day, but they're like soon after, within the year, they want to have all the movies there. So it's like, hey, you want to go watch Cinderella or The Little Mermaid or Aladdin or one of these other movies that's been in the vault for years and you can't get. It's like, well, they're all supposed to be there, but I'm like, if this is super successful at some point, they're going to start taking stuff off the service.
They might, yeah. I mean, they don't.
I hope they don't. I hope they prove me wrong again in the future.
Well, they do have like a huge library, but they don't have like a Netflix huge library. So they really need to make sure they have enough stuff for people to watch. Yeah. It's just there's no way that the Disney Plus is not going to be successful. I mean, there's just too many parents out there.
It's difficult to see how it's going to fail big time with the amount of stuff that's on there. I mean, all the Marvel stuff, all the Star Wars stuff, all the Lucasfilm stuff.
I don't know.
And then Fox. Once they roll Fox into that too, all of The Simpsons, all of Family Guy, it's just all going to be there.
It's all going to be there. It's going to be very hard for me to justify not having it. And having Netflix and Hulu, and then now I'll have to look over, try to talk my wife into a third streaming service. That's going to be tough. My wife is already like questioning whether or not we need Netflix. I'm like, we don't need it, but she only really watches Hulu. So, because she likes the TV shows that are on there. All right. Carl, this comes from our listener, Carl. The last Blockbuster store in Australia closed for good last Thursday, leaving the Blockbuster location in Bend, Oregon, as the last Blockbuster in the world. They have no intention of closing. No one has an intention of closing, sir. They just do.
But if you're a Blockbuster, the writing's kind of been on. No, this is like, we are the last. They're still apparently like a franchisee, because I forget who they said bought the Blockbuster brand, but they still have to pay a franchising license fee to them every year.
So they become a tourist attraction. There's a documentary being made about it, and they sell lots of Blockbuster Brendan Birch, in addition to renting to the many small communities around them that don't have easy access to high-speed internet. So yeah.
So they're living
Wait
off
till
of
Google comes along and installs fiber, and then you're gonna be screwed.
And you know what? They're gonna have a big upswing from Captain Marvel because
Right.
Blockbuster plays a prominent scene.
No.
There you go. People are gonna be like, I gotta go find a Blockbuster. Like, well, we're the last one. Come see us.
Drive to Oregon. So LG announced they'll be making a 48-inch OLED panels. They'll also be making 8K panels in 65 and 77-inch sizes, in addition to the 88-inch size they already announced. So, yay.
Yeah, so we should say that clearly, 48-inch OLEDs. This has been highly requested by, particularly in the UK. They're like really keen on something smaller than 55 inches.
Right, they don't have the space for the big old
That's
TVs
right.
that
I know Lee Overstreet was like really hoping for something that has beautiful wide viewing angles and consistent contrast no matter what angle you're looking at it from, but smaller than 55 inches. So there you go, Lee. This was just for you. They heard you.
So basically what he wants is big old speakers and itty-bitty TVs. Is that what I'm getting from this?
Well, this was a secondary TV.
I gotta be honest with you. I don't think Lee's allowed on this podcast anymore. He does not embody the ideals that we espouse.
He got a 65-inch OLED for his main room.
But then he returned it.
No, but then he got another one.
So he still has one.
He's got one now, yes.
All right. Well, I'll let you pass on this one, Lee. I expect a subwoofer in your future, Lee, very soon.
Yup.
Also in the news, I have been working on my fantasy novel, Touch of Pain, which is something that I haven't worked on in about half a decade. So
yeah, time went by.
Time went by. Life kind of caught up with me, and I didn't really have the time or the motivation, the energy to get it done. So I have done a major edit and rewrite. Not really rewrite, but quite a bit of editing and adding and subtracting to this thing. Like whole page is just gone. So my goal is to get this out to publication, on all your devices, by Easter or soon after. So
right.
That's how soon that's hopefully going to happen. So those of you that like reading my stuff, that's coming. All right, in the comments from our listeners, Joe Hooter is talking about wiring more than one side surround speaker in series and potentially using a butt splice to extend an existing cable run over to the second speaker if this is a retrofit situation. He wanted to suggest his preference, which is just to run a whole new speaker wire from the equipment rack to the new speaker. The same thing you would do if you're going to wire them in parallel, but then just connect the speaker wires so that they are in series back at the equipment rack end. In his opinion, this is easier, cleaner, and safer, and if you ever want to make even more changes in the future, it keeps all connections in one organized place. Joe
I'm down with that. That's very reasonable.
That seems reasonable. Joe agrees that 4-conductor speaker wire is a great idea whenever you're running in-wall speaker wires. It gives you the flexibility and redundancy. And he'd also like to hear more recommendations given to purchase used gear from places like AVS Forum, Classifieds, Audiogon, US Audio Mart, or just eBay, Craigslist, and Open Box from retailers. We don't not say those things.
It's not our go-to because you can't count on it.
Right. Not only can you can't count on it, but you have a warranty situation.
That's right. Yeah.
So, if I get the option of, I can go buy this from Accessories for Less right now with full warranty, and it's essentially brand new, or I'll wait around to a price where it's, $100 less on Audiogon, no warranty. Who knows what condition it's in. I'm going to go with Accessories for Less. That's my personal preference. Therefore, that's what I'm going to recommend.
And definitely given the time frame of how we record and release this podcast, and then also just our own personal time, which we do not have, we're not going to be perusing all of these places on behalf of other people to tell them, oh, here's a deal we found. Like, we're not doing this in real time. And so, I mean, by all means, if there's a product you want and you know that's what you want and you're willing to look for it used and you're willing to accept all the stuff that comes with buying used, we got zero problem with that. I've bought used stuff. Tom has bought used stuff. Of course, we're all for it. But it's tough to give a recommendation for used products because of we don't know the situation of availability, condition,
but
timing,
people
all
will
that.
Reach out to us and say, hey, I found this deal, this receiver or this projector or whatever. That just happened recently with the projector.
That's right.
On Craigslist. Should I take it?
Yeah.
Normally we answer the question on the podcast, but since that's a time sensitive one, a lot of times we will answer it beforehand to the person and then say our answers.
Yep.
If we're able.
Can't make a promise, but we will try if able.
Yeah. So I mean, like I said, these are all fine. I've sold stuff on eBay. I've sold stuff on Craigslist or Gumtree, as they call it in Australia. So I've done all that. So it's fine. It's a pain. To me, it's not worth the time, but it is Fine. Infinite Gary and Bryan W. shared a write-up from the screening room AV.com by Dr. Floyd Toole, in which he details his recent upgrades to his own real-world home theater. Not surprisingly, it's all Revell, Ultima speakers, and JBL synthesis electronics. Boy, it must be tough. But what makes Dr. Toole's home theater a bit unexpected is that it's not a fully dedicated theater with blacked out everything in the concrete bunker. Well, the concrete bunker seems silly, but whatever. It's an open... white-walled, multi-purpose room, albeit with visible speakers and a high price tag for the gear. So, I mean, yeah. I mean, it's funny. People get like, well, you know, if I had all the money in the world, I would have this. I'm like, dude, the guy's job is audio. He doesn't have a dedicated room.
Beyond.
You know, that's literally what he does for a living, and he doesn't have a dedicated theater room within a room box thing. You know, it's just not feasible for most people. You know, in any situation, you gotta live with what you got. Rob's got his room. I got very lucky in that we found a house that I could have a room, but you know, I'm not going to die in this house, so I'm certainly going to be moving at some point. And while a home theater will be on the list, it will not necessarily, you know, be a make or break thing. You know, there's going to be a lot of other factors that are going to have to be, you know, weighed. And if enough of those factors are like, okay, well, this house is perfect, except it doesn't have a theater room, guess what? We're still buying the house. So,
but yeah, he's got it looks like it's a 9.4.6 configuration going on, although the .6 is not 6 Atmos speakers. It is front heights, rear heights, and then a voice of God and a center height. So he's doing the Oro 3D thing. But even though, like, so 9.4.6 is not like the most speakers you could ever have, but he's using the JBL synthesis processor that's based off of the Trinov, which is like a $40,000 processor, and it's just a processor. You need separate amplifiers for those two, so that's almost a bit of overkill because he didn't really need that processor. But hey, you know, it's Harman, so Dr. Floyd Toole and Harman.
Is there a screen that pops down there?
There's a projection screen that comes down.
Okay, because that TV is itty-bitty.
I know, right? Yeah. But yeah, no, he does have a Firehawk projection screen. He went for the Firehawk because it has some ambient light rejecting qualities, and he does have these white walls. Subwoofers are hidden behind panels up front and in the rear, with basically one in each corner of this space. And then I do remember from before, so this is like an update because he's done the whole Atmos and Oro thing, but I remember the last time he detailed his theater, he's got this sort of... area behind his seats in the middle of his back wall. It was like basically where a fireplace would have gone, but a fireplace was never installed. That whole thing is a bass trap. I remember him detailing that from before. So, you know, he has acoustic treatments in here. They're just hidden. They're hidden behind curtains and drapes. They're hidden where the fireplace would have been. They're
looks
hidden
like
behind
up front where
panels.
the cabinets are. Those
right.
are all little traps there too.
So, you know, it's not that he's against trapping and whatnot. He's just like, I don't want it to look like acoustic trapping.
His speakers are upside down. His front speakers are upside down.
Well, yeah, because he's raised these towers and then turned them upside down so that the tweeters are closer to seated ear level. It's interesting to do with Revel salons.
It looks like they're gonna fall over, dude.
I'm sure they are not. He showed some of the brackets that he had constructed.
I know.
For doing
it's funny. The rear
but,
speakers though really look like they are. The height speakers are seem to be way too close. Like I would not recommend them being that close or that wide.
Yeah, compared to where the surround backs are, basically.
Yeah.
But anyway,
whatever.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's showing that even when you can afford and can have the best of the best, you don't necessarily have to have a pitch black Batcave theater. You know, it's not the only choice.
All right, is that the last one? Yeah, okay. Let's get to the questions. Kris and Thomas. These guys came from Twitter, both of them, maybe?
Thomas's did. Chris's came by email.
Kris got a Denon X3400H. He's loving the way it sounds. Okay, and it seems to have ample power, but the HDMI-ARC is giving him problems. Never heard of this problem before. Wow, the first time for everything, I guess. You know, who would have guessed? Yeah. First up, can ARC actually deliver better audio quality than an optical connection? He thought he had heard something about ARC being able to do lossless audio, or that it can sound better in some way, but is that actually true? Not regular ARC. The eARC can do lossless.
eARC can do lossless. That is sort of the major difference. Yeah, the regular audio return channel.
Why are you quieter?
I don't know. Did
You
something
didn't do
happen?
anything?
I didn't press anything. My levels didn't change. I shouldn't be quieter.
Okay, whatever. Go on.
All right. So yeah, regular audio return channel actually carries the exact same signals as what an optical audio connection can carry. A SPDIF, Sony Philips digital interface, can carry. So yeah, that is not true if somebody was saying it can do lossless. Now, there is an occasional exception, which is that regular audio return channel can carry Dolby Digital Plus, including the Atmos extension on top of Dolby Digital Plus. So if you're using, say, an LG OLED and its built-in Netflix app, you can get Atmos audio in the form of Dolby Digital Plus Atmos coming out of your HDMI-ARC connection. Now, Vizio managed to get that working out of the optical connection as well, because, again, the bandwidth limitations are the same. Right. But most optical connections won't carry Dolby Digital Plus Atmos. There has to be some, tweaking going on behind the scenes to make that work. So functionally, that could be a difference. You're more likely to find Atmos coming out of an HDMI-ARC connection in its Dolby Digital Plus form than out of an optical connection, although it isn't strictly impossible.
All right. His TV is a Sharp with Roku built in. He enabled HDMI-CEC, which should have also turned on ARC, audio return channel. Things didn't work right away. Shocking. So he tried turning all of the HDMI control, power, and ARC settings on in the X3400H. He tried setting the TV's ARC output to auto, and then Dolby plus DTS, and nothing worked. So he connected an optical audio cable, and that seemed to work fine, sending audio from all of his TV built-in apps, except for Netflix. If he turns up the TV's built-in speakers, there's audio from Netflix, but via optical to his X3400H, no sound. And the ARC doesn't work for anything. So any idea what's wrong here? Well, my first thing would be to check to make sure that you're plugged into the ARC inputs.
Yeah, make sure that it's the...
That would be the first thing, because not all HDMI inputs are the same. There's usually one that's for audio return channel. So there's that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the pedantic make sure that, yes, so there will be one HDMI input on your television that will be marked ARC, and there will be the monitor 1 HDMI output on your Denon that is marked ARC. So yes, make sure of that. Okay, now here's a weird thing. It's not supposed to be this way with regular HDMI ARC. It is supposed to be this way with the new enhanced audio return channel, but that's not what you're dealing with. But I'm pretty sure the X3400H, is that one capable of being upgraded to eARC? I know the 3500 is for sure. I'm not sure if the 34... Regardless, what I'm getting at is, in eARC, you have to use an HDMI cable that is HDMI with Ethernet. That is necessary for eARC. It is not supposed to be necessary for regular ARC, but I'm wondering if maybe these new receivers that have the eARC stuff ready to go, if maybe it shouldn't be this way. I'm totally speculating it out on a limb, but it might be worth trying, since they're not very expensive, getting an HDMI cable from Monoprice or Amazon Basics that is HDMI with Ethernet. Any of the ones that are marked as premium high speed and have the full little holographic sticker and everything to go with that, those all should be HDMI with Ethernet. So a cable swap is something I would be willing to try, because it's not a tremendous amount of money to give that a try, and it might be that Ethernet thing. Now, why on earth would Netflix not be working from the optical connection when all of the other apps are? That makes no sense.
Well, the only thing that you can often select, I mean, it should work. I can't see why it wouldn't, but if he could somehow select audio output that was not compatible, like an Atmos stream or something like that, but even then it should work sometimes.
And it wouldn't be coming out of that Sharp. That Sharp with Roku built in wouldn't be sending Atmos. It's just not a thing it can do.
Yeah.
That is bizarre. I mean, that's just really, I've never even heard of that being, like, especially it being Netflix of all things, not working via optical when everything else does. That makes no, I have no clue on that. I am completely stumped. So yeah, I mean, is there anything? Is there just something potentially wrong with his Sharp TV. The only other thing I can say, and this is coming up, actually, maybe we should mention Thomas's related one, because the only other thing I can say is it's time to start swapping gear. Like if you have another television with an ARC output, you try that to see if the same thing happens, and maybe the receiver has
not
a
everybody
problem.
has extra TVs just
I
lying
know.
around, Rob.
I know they don't.
So on a related note, Thomas has an LG E7 OLED and a Marantz SR7011 receiver. ARC was working fine for him for the past year or so, but then it suddenly stopped working. Optical worked in his case, and he tried connecting to a different TV in his, to his Marantz, and the ARC worked from that TV. So it must be something to do with his OLED, right? Any ideas on that one? Was there a recent update?
There was a recent firmware update that came.
That would be the thing that would
just now.
I would re-update it, if you can. You can redo the update.
Because, I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense. I mean, if you connect a different television to the same AV receiver and ARC works fine there, pretty hard to say that the AV receiver is to blame, right? I mean,
right.
If it's working. And the E7 was working previously. I mean, that's the only thing you can suspect. I mean, either something has gone wrong with the port, with the HDMI out port, or you moved something around and you accidentally did plug back into the wrong port. These things are easy. I have done that. I have plugged something back into the wrong port. So nobody is blaming you if that's what happened. Got to give the pedantic answer. But otherwise, the only thing I can suspect is the firmware update. Download it directly from LG's website and update it via USB stick instead of doing the network update. That's about the only other thing you could try, because it should work. Should work.
Yeah. All right, Tap on Twitter. What's the best way to finish his false wall? It seems like the most people just cover it with some sort of fabric. Will any fabric do? Will any fabric do? Some kind of mesh? Or since it's framed just like a normal wall, should you cover it with drywall? 2 layers of drywall and just have the cutouts for his speakers and then hang his acoustically transparent screen over it? No. So the way I like to think about this is I would like that wall to be transparent to sound no matter what.
That's right.
Yeah, just let the sound come in and out. So yesterday, my son's planning on having a D&D group over tomorrow afternoon, and we have a teak table that we're super careful with, even though we really don't have to be. But it needs, my wife wants it. We're not allowed to roll dice on it, so we went and got a big piece of felt.
Yeah.
So just so that they could game on it, and I wouldn't have to worry about anything.
Sure.
Well, while I was there, I picked up some speaker grill fabric, which ended up being about $10 a yard.
Yeah.
So, and that's real wide too. It's plenty wide. So I wanted to finish my last 2 room treatments, and I'm going to paint this, and then finally be done with this stupid room. So that's what you want. You want something like that. And the test that you want to do, if you're I don't want black speaker grill fabric in the
Fair
front
enough.
room.
Sure.
Fair enough. All right. Take whatever fabric it is, put it, and people are going to think you're weird. Put it up to your mouth and blow. If you feel zero resistance, if the air just goes out of your mouth and through this thing just like you were normally breathing, it's good. It will not impede the sound at all. Anything else is in some way impeding the sound. So you would want something like that. Muslin, that sort of material, it would be fine. And there's different colors of that you could choose for up front. So yeah, that's what I would do.
Yeah, I mean, if you do want to use speaker grill cloth, Parts Express, they sell it by the linear foot on a 72-inch wide roll. So it's a pretty wide roll to begin with, and then by the linear foot. And it's, between $6.50 to $7.50, depending on how much you buy. So that's very inexpensive if you want to cover a large area just with black speaker grill cloth. But if you do want something that looks a little bit different, now over at Gick Acoustics, they sell all the Guilford of Maine fabrics that are acoustically transparent. They are much more expensive. What is about $15 a yard, those things. But, look quite nice. Also, though, Acoustimac sells acoustically transparent fabric, including one that I really like, which is acoustically transparent micro suede, which, really looks nice sometimes. But they've got things varying between $11 per linear foot up to $20 per linear foot if you want to get some of the most expensive Guilford of Maine stuff. But yeah, I mean, they have their acoustic suede stuff, which is only $11 or $12 a linear foot. So not too bad if you want something that looks a little nicer than speaker grill cloth. But yeah, the general idea of a false wall, because there was a little bit of confusion going on when I was talking back and forth with them, and it's, the idea is that you have your normal construction. I mean, just think of you make a room as normal. You've drywalled it, you've done all the finishing, everything is done, and then all you're doing is erecting some framing to hold your acoustically transparent screen. That's really all you're doing.
Right.
I mean, you could just leave it at that, but most people say, well, I don't want just bare framing that I can still see that's holding up my screen, or I want to visually hide my speakers behind that screen as well. So they just cover the rest of that framing with some acoustically transparent apparent fabric. That's why we call it a false wall. It's really not a wall. It's just some framing. It's acoustically transparent. It's visually opaque, because it's fabric. So that's the whole idea that's going on there. However, things changed a little bit. So yeah, one question on the fabric before we get to that.
Yeah, he says what color. So honestly, I mean, if Dr. Floyd Toole can have a white room, you choose. You know, whatever works best for your aesthetics. It really, honestly, it does. Rob's going to tell you gray or black.
Yeah,
but
I mean, I would have you go gray just because it's color neutral, so it's not going to bias your eye in any way.
Right.
You're not going to have to change your projector calibration because you've got a bright red front wall or something like that. So I would tell you go to gray. If you don't want black, I would tell you to go gray.
But the reality is it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Something dark would be great.
Usually,
not super bright. But,
yeah, I mean, you don't want to be distracted by the wall around your screen. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, you're not going to be distracted by it. The main reason for the framing, the false wall is 3.5 feet. The main reason for the framing for the false wall is 3.5 feet in front of the framing. Is that right next to the foundation? Okay, what the heck is up with the sentence? Let me try again.
Just read the words as they are, and it'll
The
make
main
sense.
reason the framing for the false wall is 3.5 feet in front of the framing that is right next to the foundation is because the space is being used to house an electrical panel and a sump pump. Okay, whatever.
Right. So there's the foundation, concrete foundation, then there's framing right next to the foundation as normal, right? The way you would normally finish a basement, you put up some framing right next to the foundation wall, and then he's put the framing for his false wall 3.5 feet in front of that. So that's a little bit more space than you would normally have for a false wall. Normally a false wall you'd build 18 inches to 2 feet in front of the normal framing, but he's put it 3.5 feet. The reason being he's got a sump pump and electrical panel back there.
All right, so does that change things? Maybe put up drywall and just have cutouts for the speakers. Maybe have a huge cutout that's basically the size of a acoustically transparent projection screen, but everything else around the screen is still drywall. What would be best? So I'm looking at this. I'm trying to understand what's happening here. So
so he actually has a doorway in the false wall framing over to the right because he needs an access to get back to the sump pump and the electrical panel if need be. So he's like, can he basically just make what was going to be the false wall into a wall and just be like, that's my wall now? And so now my sump pump and electrical panel is behind there, but then he's like, I don't really want to put my speakers in front of the false wall framing and the screen even farther in front of that. So he's like, could I just put cutouts in the drywall? And he's getting Ascend SE series speakers, which are normal speakers.
How much noise is going to be made? The electrical panel won't make any noise. What about that sump pump? That sounds like it makes noise. In which case, you
could close it in.
Yeah. You
could close in the sump pump.
Right, you would have to build, but then you have to build another panel to get access to it. But you could
you could have like a door inside of this 3.5. So I mean, you can think of the 3.5 feet that's behind the false wall framing almost like its own little room. You could, put a door to the sump pump. So I mean, the thing is, his screen is going to be 10 feet wide, and if we're looking at the framing, he's got these soffits that are on either side. So the room as a total is 18 feet wide. Those soffits are 4 feet wide, meaning the space in between those soffits that we're seeing is 10 feet. That's going to be the width of his screen. So you could have drywall basically underneath each soffit, right? That would take care of, you'd have some drywall just around the doorway. You'd have drywall over where the sump pump is. That means you could maybe close in that sump pump with a door, and that whole sump pump is now enclosed with drywall. Then just the area between the two soffits, you still just leave open as framing. That's your false wall now. Your speakers go back there.
And you just put your screen there, and then
your screen goes there.
The speakers would have to be behind the screen. They couldn't be behind the other two sides. That would be okay. I mean, the thing is, it would be, as soon as you try to sell this house, people are like, how come you have half a wall?
What is going on?
What is going on here?
But I mean, I definitely wouldn't like drywall the whole thing and then just have cutouts for regular rear ported speakers. That's not really going to work properly.
No.
you know, yeah, if you were thinking that putting drywall on the false wall is somehow going to provide any soundproofing, if you have an opening the size of your 10-foot screen, nope, no soundproofing being given there. So, yeah, the only thing that you would do if you're trying to soundproof around that sump pump is you have to enclose the sump pump, give it another door within the 3.5-foot space that's behind there, and then drywall on the
panel,
left.
I guess, not a door, but an access panel.
Yeah, and well, a way to get to it. Yeah. But you still want to put drywall on that framing that is right next to the foundation. That's also, I mean, imagine the false wall framing weren't there. You still want to finish this room as you normally would. That doesn't change. Right. The false wall shouldn't be what you're...
Oh, I'm not frowning at you. I'm frowning at something else. Sorry.
Okay.
No, you're right. You are right. Somebody just sent me an email that says that I see that you still work for Dallas News. What?
Nope.
No, not only do I not,
get
but
weird
I never
emails,
have.
dude.
I get weird emails, man. All right. That answers that. Lee.
It does.
Lee has a B7 OLED. He's noticed black crush where details in the darkest parts of the images just get crushed into a uniform black with no shadow detail. What settings should he change to fix this? Well, contrast, brightness, I mean, kind of all the stuff. But you should be able to just go into, like, I want to know what the settings are right now to see what's going on there. I mean, and what source is having the black crush? I mean, is it coming from...
Probably all of them.
Oh, well, one would think, yeah.
On an OLED, you're always going to have a little bit of black crush. It's basically unavoidable on an OLED. If you're looking at a test pattern and you're like, the box that is supposed to be one tick up from absolute black has been crushed into black, it's like, yep. That's just kind of the way it is.
That shouldn't be super noticeable,
It
though.
shouldn't be super noticeable on content. Now, I will tell you, on the B7s, I have a B7, you do need to set the brightness setting to 51, not 50, in order to get basically the most shadow detail that you can without starting to artificially raise the black level. Now, you can, if you're in a well-lit environment, you might end up with the brightness setting higher than that. But if you are in pitch blackness... You would think that the default 50 would be correct, but it isn't. It needs to be 51. So you can definitely tick up the brightness setting a wee bit. The other one that you would do, and this is a little bit to taste, is you would adjust the gamma setting. Because by default, the BT 1886 or gamma 2.4 setting is technically correct, but it does look darn dark. I usually use the 2.2 setting, even in a very, very dark room, but there is also the gamma 1.9 setting that you're allowed to use. It's okay, and that'll will raise up the dark shadow detail if you just want to see more detail in there. So those are the settings to look at: gamma and brightness.
All right. What's our opinion of using a third vertical bookshelf speaker as a center speaker instead of a dedicated horizontal center speaker model? If you can do it, it's great.
Yes.
If you can't do it, you're like everybody else.
I mean, that's what it was supposed to be.
But the TV's in the way.
But the
most
TV
of the time.
got in the way.
so they're like, they were taking their center speaker, which was the same as their other speakers, and just turning it on the side because that's the only way they could like see the TV still.
That's right.
And so they were like, well, let's just design them that way anyways.
Yeah.
So,
no, I mean, the whole horizontal center speaker thing was a compromise.
Yeah.
That was never the original intent. It was supposed to be 3 identical speakers all at the same height in front of you, but the only way you can really do that is if you have an acoustically transparent projection setup. So, yeah, we're all for it if you can do it.
When he turns on his TV, the dead-end X3400H also turns on, and so does his NVIDIA Shield, and the receiver automatically switches to the input that his Shield is plugged into, even though it doesn't always want that. What settings does he need to change to prevent that? Turn off HDMI-CEC, because that's got to be what's happening here, basically.
I mean, he's probably worried about ARC.
Okay.
In order to have ARC working, because the apps built into the B7 are great, so... he probably wants ARC to still work, in which case you have to have HDMI-CEC turned on in the LG.
But surely you can control what it powers on and what it powers off.
Yes, you can. So let's go through this. On the LG, on your OLED, you would have to go into the... So if you go into the audio settings and you turn on HDMI audio return channel, it will automatically turn on HDMI-CEC, which LG calls Simplink.
Sure.
They can't just call it HDMI-CE. They must call it something else, and they call it Simplink, and that will automatically turn on. But you can go into the general settings of the LG, scroll down to where it says Simplink, and there it gives you more options one of which is to turn off the power setting so that it doesn't automatically turn other devices on and off when you turn the TV on and off, or the TV itself doesn't turn on and off when you turn, say, your AV receiver on or off. So you can separate the power part of it from the rest of HDMI-CEC, including ARC. But overall, SimpLink needs to be on, ARC needs to be on if you're using it, but the power part can be off. So that's auto power sync, they call it. You can turn that off. All right, over on your, let's see, Denon, on your AV receiver. You'd want to go on that one into the video settings and then the HDMI section, and there you can choose to turn on nothing but audio return channel. They have HDMI control as a separate thing. They have HDMI, what is the other? I think they have an auto power sync thing as well.
Right.
As a separate thing, and they have audio return channel as a completely separate line item that can be turned on independent of everything else. So that you could do. You could just turn on audio return channel, turn HDMI control, and all the rest of the HDMI stuff off. Then on the Shield, there is under the display and sound settings, because why would HDMI-CEC be anywhere other than display and sound? But there it is. Under the display and sound settings in the Shield, there is an item called power control, which says turn on only via HDMI-CEC, turn off only via HDMI-CEC. Somehow they separate it on and off. And then they also have one that says ignore active source. And that's the thing that's making your inputs change when you don't want it to. So you actually want to turn, ironically, you want to turn that one on because you want it to ignore the active source command. Yeah, not exactly intuitive. I don't blame anyone for being like, yeah, this wasn't plug and play. So there you go.
HDMI making things easier for you every day.
Isn't it, though? Just plug it in. It all works, doesn't it?
It all works. It all works in random and confusing ways. But it works.
So many settings.
Fred's house is under renovation, but he has settled on which room will be the theater room, and the layout has been finalized. It'll be 12 and a half feet wide, 13 and a little bit more than a half feet long, although it isn't quite a perfect rectangle, as the back of the room where the double door entrance is comes in a foot on either side. So it's just a bit narrower in the back of the room.
A little bit narrower behind his seats, that's all. Yeah.
So, all right. That's because the door is on the right wall and comes in, juts in a little bit. So,
well, that's the closet door.
Oh, the closet.
He's got a closet door that's in the rear right corner.
And then there's the wall just juts in a little bit on the left back wall.
And he's got double doors on the actual back wall right behind his seat. That's the entrance to the room.
Yeah, so that's about
12 and a half by 13 and a half.
Yeah, the 2 feet. Those jut ins come 2.5, about 2 feet in. All right. So am I scroll? Did I scroll? Did I scroll too soon? Oh, yeah. Okay, there we go. He knows his viewing preferences, and he really wants to be 10 feet from eyes to screen. That leaves him just under 3.5 feet from the back of his head to the back wall. Wants a bit of depth for the displays accounted for. He's got a Denon X4300H and 7 speakers, plus plans to get a pair of 2 RBH in-ceiling speakers. In-ceiling top fronts and front heights are no problem. No, you can't do that. But he wants to know what we think he should do regarding top rears. If he goes by Dolby's placement guidelines, even using their minimum 125-degree elevation angle for the top rears would put them right where the back wall is. He does already own a pair of SVS prime elevation speakers, so should he just mount those up high on his back wall and call them top rears? Mount them on the ceiling against the back wall? Would that be better? Or should he go for in-ceiling speakers, even though they'll be very close to the back wall and technically not quite far back enough to be top rears? Okay, so we're taking a look at this here.
So,
and
I mean, first things first, he's getting a pair of in-ceiling RBH speakers. Those are going to be his top fronts. He's like, yeah, I can call them top fronts or I can call them front heights, but that's no problem. One way or another, these in-ceiling speakers are going to be going in front of him in his ceiling. But he wants to have, 4 overhead speakers. He already owns a pair.
So why aren't we doing top middles? I guess he can't wire for those? Is that...
Well, I mean, he could. That's why I think he mentioned that, calling them front heights is no problem if they're in front. But he's just thinking, like, the recommendation is, if you can, to do top fronts, top rears. That's what Dolby recommends. He's like, if I do top rears, they'll be right against the back wall and still not technically quite far enough back, because they're supposed to be a 125-degree elevation angle at a minimum. So, you know, he's like, they're definitely behind me, but not quite as far back as Dolby would like. So should he just use his prime elevation speakers that he already owns, or should he be buying in-ceiling speakers, putting them as far back as he possibly can, or doing something else like you're suggesting, maybe top middles instead?
Well, if he's really dedicated to the top fronts, top rears, I think the prime elevation speakers would be just fine for this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if that's what you're really dedicated to. I mean, to me, the other option is in-ceiling top middles, top fronts, or front heights. Sorry, front heights.
Yeah, so front heights and top middles.
Yeah,
that's the other option. Right.
Those are the only two things I would look at in this situation.
I mean,
now,
actually, you could even do that using your prime elevations by having front heights mounted either on your ceiling a little bit farther forward and using the angle of the prime elevations to angle them toward you, or mounting them on your front wall as front heights could be the way you do it, and then using the in-ceiling speakers as top middles. I mean,
which is what I have.
Alternative.
So, yeah, those would work. Those would work fine. Now, he's just got a 5.1 setup otherwise, it looks like. 5.2 setup
5.2 otherwise, that's correct.
Yeah, so, you know, I mean, really.
Yeah, and he was kind of like, should he do 7.2.2 instead of 5.2.4? I definitely wouldn't do that in here. You know, you don't have enough space behind you that I'm like, oh, you've got to have surround backs. In fact, you probably don't have enough space that I would even really highly recommend surround backs to you. So I'm in agreement of keeping your 5.2 setup as your floor level. I want you to have 4 overhead speakers, but honestly, I would go top fronts and use your prime elevations as yeah, I mean, yeah, you can call them top rears. They're close enough. Should he mount them on the back wall and angled down a bit, or mount them on the ceiling and angled, you know, kind of in?
I don't know that he's going to have a huge amount of options here, since those doors are there. So, I mean, you could, basically, to make the angle right, you could lower them down on the wall, so that you know, basically, if you look at the angle as it would go back
I see,
through,
right, yeah.
You know,
right.
that would make your angle more correct.
Yeah.
But I think it's like 6 of one, half dozen another. Who really cares?
I want them right up against the ceiling, yeah. And
I would, for me, aesthetically, I mean, just functionally, I would put them right against the ceiling like they're meant to be.
Yeah, I would want them as close to aiming straight down as they can be. So I mean, if it's no skin off your back either way, I would mount your prime elevation speakers on the ceiling and have them shooting
rather
down.
than angle towards you.
Yeah, which should give you even more clearance for your door. So I don't see a downside as long as that's doable. That's what I would do.
So he's got a pair of SVS SB2000 subs to use in here. He's thinking front right corner, rear left corner placement, but since the room's not perfectly not a perfect rectangle, is that still advisable? So he could go middle side. No, he can't even go middle side walls. What is that on the right wall? Is that or in the left wall? Are those windows? Doors?
Windows on the left wall, and then there's some kind of door on the right wall if we're looking at the renderings. So, by the way, he did say that Gick Acoustics recommended to him a program called Room LE. It's just at roomle.com. So he made up these renderings in there. They don't actually have like a thing for in-ceiling speakers, so he just put lights.
Sure.
But it works. I mean, it gives you the visual of where these things would be located. So yeah, that's pretty cool, because I remember asking before for any suggestions for software that's good for mocking up a room. So apparently Room LE works quite nicely. But yeah, I mean,
my suggestion here is to take and put your rear sub in one of those corners right in front of that little false wall, that little jut in. And then go across the room mirrored, which would probably be right next to the door or the window on the other side. So it's going to be about 2 feet into the room.
What's wrong with the corners?
Well, I mean, there's nothing technically wrong with them, but I think that with the jut in, I don't know. I guess it's 6 of one, half dozen another. Really, I said that twice now.
I'm perfectly fine with your corner placement. I think that makes total sense. Yeah. I don't see any problem. I mean, it not being a perfect, right? You know what? No room is a perfect rectangle.
Especially if I'm the one that helped move the wall in here.
Right.
Who knows how straight that wall is? Luckily, I didn't do most of the measurements. I guess as another option, that would be your other option. If you wanted to put them, like, you can't put them midpoint side walls, but you could put them, you know, one in front of the window or door and one behind the window or the door on the other side, essentially, is what it works out to be.
I'm totally fine with these corners. That's where I would put them. Yeah.
Okay. Earle, let's go on. Is it practical or advisable to use pro audio amplifiers in the home theater? It seems as though pro amps deliver way more watts per dollar. They also deliver way more sound per watt. Generally speaking, pro amps have fans and aren't necessarily have the lowest noise floor as amps that are designed for home theater. That being said, there's been tons of times that I not only have recommended these amps, I have looked at them for myself.
Sure.
Now, you end up having to pay a little bit more than like the bottom basement price that you can get some pro amps at, because you have to go for the fanless ones or the ones with the really quiet fans or something along those lines. But I've looked at them before, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with them. You just have to be a little bit more cautious about what you buy.
Yep. You'll want to be cognizant of what inputs they accept. I mean, anything can be adapted to just about anything else.
Sure.
But there are some pro amps that are strictly balanced. So if you don't have a true balanced output, that might not work. But most pro amps can accept an unbalanced signal. So even if they only have XLR connections or they only have speak-on connections or something like that, you can still just take an RCA to XLR cable adapter.
Right.
But you do want to be cognizant, make sure that it will accept an unbalanced signal if you're connecting it to a normal AV receiver or something like that. So yeah, I mean, it's a few things to be aware of, but there's absolutely no reason why you can't use them in a home theater or something.
And people do on the regular, and you just have to, I mean...
Well, I mean, look at these, multi-million-dollar home theaters are often Crown amplifiers or something, and those are pro amps. So yeah.
The amps are in a different room.
They're in a different room. Yeah.
So no one cares that they're loud or weird. So he asks, most pro amps appear to be Class D, while most consumer amps appear to be Class AB. In practical terms, what's the difference? So, okay, so there was Class A, Class AB. Well, there's actually technically Class B as well, but nobody used that. That's a broadcast amp that doesn't really get used in theater applications. And Class D was sort of the next thing, and then there's a bunch of other classes that are essentially
they're mostly just class AB or Class D with a switching mode power supply is what creates the Class G and Class H and whatnot. So they're not really a different amplifier technology.
So a Class A amp is essentially on all the time.
Yeah.
Constantly full power to everything all the time, whether or not you use it. So you lose upwards of 90% of the power you put into it in heat.
Yeah.
It just soaks out the top of it. Now, Class AB, on the other hand, basically what it does is it's on essentially half the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it essentially is how it works. It's only amplifying one half of the signal and the other half of the, not really one half of the signal, one half of the waveform, that sort of thing. So it saves, you're usually losing about 45%, or around there to heat. Whereas Class D, which is a switching amplifier, is only on when you need it to be on, and that's it. All right. You're upwards of 90, 80% efficient in these things on the regular. You can even depending on the how they make it could be less than that or even more, but they are extremely efficient. Now, linearity as we look at as amps, how linear they are. Class A is AB tend to be very linear amps. This is a very well-known technology. We've been using it for a very long time. Everybody's very good at designing them, no problems. Class D, on the other hand, tends to be non-linear. Can be less linear if designed incorrectly, or
it's more reactive to the impedance of the speaker. Class D is, and because speakers vary their impedance based upon which frequency they're playing, you can get some non-linearities out of a Class D amp. Now they put all kinds of filters and capacitance banks and all types of stuff in there, but that raises the cost more and more. So you can find Class D amps that are just as or more expensive than Class AB amplifiers. You can put linear power supplies into a Class D amplifier that lowers the efficiency but tends to raise the linearity a little bit. So there's all kinds of things that can be done with these. But yeah, I mean, so like in practical terms, do they sound wildly different from one another? No, for the most part, no. If you happen to have speakers that have huge swings in impedance, or in particular low impedance at high frequencies,
and that's where you run into problems.
Tends to be an issue.
If you think about it this way, like Class C amps have been for a long time used in subwoofers. That's where we kind of, the bash amps. Suddenly we had all these high-powered amps that weren't putting on a ton of heat and didn't suck up a bunch of power, and they were small. And you could put them in a subwoofer box, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, these good." Well, if you think about the frequencies that a subwoofer is doing, it's doing from like 80 hertz down to 20 hertz. That's not that many hertz.
It's not high frequency.
Yeah, there's not a whole bunch of frequencies that you are looking at here. So therefore, linearity tends to be less important, or at least as far as impedance swings, because these impedance swings are not going to be as huge. But if you go from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, that's a ton of frequencies and tons of places where impedance swings can happen, and therefore your Class D amps tend to have more problems. Now, I've heard very audible differences between Class D amps and Class AB amps before, and it's because of this. Yeah. And if it's well designed, it tends to be expensive. And if you look at these things and you're trying to use them for a full range speaker, or even just a regular bookshelf speaker or tower speaker that's only going to be playing from 80 hertz up to 20 kilohertz, you still have to worry about linearity and how they're going to react to that impedance of that speaker. So speaker matching tends to be a little bit more, I guess, important. Yep. But at the same time, if it's well designed, it's going to be like any other amp. And sonically, the goal is all of them should sound the same. I don't care
they
what
should all deliver a linear signal. They should all just be a chord with gain. That's what right. An amplifier should be.
That's right. Yeah.
But
so if these people who are all like, "Oh, this amp sounds better than that amp," well, that means one of the amps is not sounding. It is basically something worse. There's not better than. It should be either the same or bad. It shouldn't be better.
Inaccurate in some way. Yeah,
right.
I mean, what you'll find in professional amplifiers is they will have more detailed specifications and might have a specification for this is the impedance range of the speakers this amplifier was designed to drive. Like if you look at the Crown amplifier lineup, why do they have dozens of amplifiers with seemingly all the exact same amount of wattage? Right. Well, it's because they've got individual amplifiers to power certain speakers, given the impedance range that those speakers are working within. So you have to be, again, it's just another thing to be aware of, whereas consumer amplifiers, they're generally being made so that they can drive just about anything you might connect to them, because they know consumers aren't going to be looking that, they won't be thinking in that amount of detail about right. the speakers that they're connecting to the amps. So you'll find that as well.
And so if you were to buy some speakers, say you were like, okay, I want to buy some RBH speakers, and I want to get some amps to power them. I want to get some pro amps. You could actually contact RBH and say, here's the lineup that they have over here. I'm buying these speakers from you. Which ones? They could answer you that, and probably would, because depending on who you talk to over there, but they would be able to give you an answer and say, yes, this is the one that works with our impedance, because they have all the measurements. They can basically just overlay them and go, yeah, this one works fine. But when you start working with companies like, much bigger companies like Polk and Klipsch and, other like huge, Harman and all that stuff, you're not going to be able to get that kind of answer. You have to do it yourself. That's why, consumer level gear basically is like, we play nice with everybody, and therefore we're AB, for the most part. So yes, what would be the pros and cons of using pro amps? Fan noise, higher noise floor. I mean, it could be all possibly. Of those, plus all the stuff that we've said, impedance mismatches, could be tons of stuff. Inputs.
Connectors it accepts.
Connectors and inputs it accepts and stuff like that. All the stuff that we've said, plus probably more. Can you use a combination of both pro and consumer amplifiers together? I don't think. I mean, it's not like they're gonna
fight each other.
Night at the museum, like take up arms at night. Get out of our house! This is a pro level amplifier only. Nothing like that.
Totally fine.
That'd be fine. They really don't care. You'd be surprised how much inanimate objects don't care which other inanimate objects they sit next to. I'm not making fun of you, dude. I'm not. Don't get all hurt about it, because I'm not. I'm just the thought of them sitting next to each other and one trying to nudge the other one off the shelf just cracks me up. You come in there and there's your solid state amplifier just hanging from some cables, right? All bruised on one side, scratched up. What happened in here? I don't know. Maybe the cat got in there. Christian on Twitter. Does the game mode on the LG OLED TV do anything at all to help prevent burn-in. Someone on the forum said something to that effect, but Christian thinks that's some BS. No, I wouldn't think so. I mean, I would think
a thing about burn-in.
I would think that what it would do is just essentially increase like brightness and contrast, sort of artificially, so that you can things just overall get brighter.
It's mostly that they just turn off all the processing to get the latency as low as possible. Yeah, that's what the game mode is.
I was going to say, and frame rate, maybe any sort of variable frame rate that they might. It's to get
well, I guess on the brand newest ones like the C9 and stuff that are coming out this year, they're going to have the variable refresh rate. So that might be a really good reason to use game mode specifically for games, but it has nothing to do with burn-in.
If you manually turn off all of the video processing stuff, edge enhancement, true motion, noise reduction, etc., is there really any need to use game mode for games, or can one picture mode work just fine for movies and games alike? I mean, I turn all that stuff off anyways. So, I mean, I can't imagine that game mode would do anything for me that would be beneficial over what I'm already doing. So, yes, I guess this is my answer. Yes, you can just turn on and should turn all that stuff off.
Yeah, I want all that stuff off for my movies anyway, but I know some people like to have the the frame interpolation on for sports or something like that. It makes it look a bit smoother, although sometimes you get that weird little, the soccer ball just broke into 3 soccer balls, a weird effect because it's interpolating frames, but whatever. No, if you turn all the stuff off, I guess, I know it's technically possible there might still be some kind of processing that you can't defeat manually, so maybe that would increase your latency a teeny tiny little bit. But no, in general, if you turn it all off, it should be very close in latency. You can use one picture mode. However, this whole variable refresh rate thing, when the auto low latency mode that is available on the brand newest ones, the C9, that stuff like that, that would be a reason. But then, hey, if it does auto low latency mode and variable refresh rate, it's doing it all automatically. So,
right,
not a problem.
Jonathan says, how come we don't highlight products that are just plain cool looking? Maybe they're not the least expensive. Maybe they don't have the most features, but some products are just cool looking. Doesn't that count for something? Jonathan uses, for example, a Macintosh MX 122, a 7.2.4 Pre-Pro. It has Odyssey.
Well, that's just an example. He doesn't have one.
Oh, he doesn't.
It's an example of something that looks.
Oh, he's using this as an example. He doesn't use it.
Example. That's right.
It has Odyssey Multi-Q XT32 Aura 3D, all the latest HDR support, and all the features you'd find on a near flagship Denon or Marantz, but it looks cooler.
It doesn't do 13 speakers at once. It does 11 at once, not 13. So it's near flagship. Yeah.
So 11. It does the same as mine. There you go. And yeah, it's $7,000. But is that enough reason for us never to talk about it? Yes. Honestly.
Well, especially since it is a Marantz 7704. It is.
In a cooler box. Okay, let's look back. Let's look back to it wasn't Macintosh. Who was the company that dropped an Oppo into a different case that I found? Discovered.
That might have been an Oppo, because I remember there was a Panasonic that was
no, that Theta. Was a different one. That was a Theta. That was a Theta amplifier. Yeah.
No, Theta had a Blu-ray player it was a DVD player. This was all the way back in the day. Theta had a DVD player that not only was it the guts of a Panasonic player, it was a full Panasonic player, case and all, wrapped in a Theta case, and they sold that for $3,500 more than the Panasonic sold for.
Well, the Oppo. So the one I found was an Oppo. When their universal disc players, this was Blu-ray and universal disc came out.
Yeah.
And it was essentially an Oppo with the front cut off and different things on the sides, and a different panel up front, and it was essentially the same player. The Oppo was going for like $500 or $800, and this thing was going for like $4,000.
Well, Cambridge still has that. They still have the current and now discontinued Oppo players. They have a version of theirs that's
right.
So yeah, there's that. But no, so I mean, the evidence here at this Macintosh. First of all, the remote, hilariously, that's the Marantz remote. Have a look at that. It says Macintosh on it instead of Marantz, but that is the Marantz remote. If you look at the manual. It's identical, except they've replaced every mention of AVRant with Macintosh. And
somebody copy pasted that bad boy.
If you look at the internal menus, like the setup menus, they are the Denon and AVRant menus. Like
Jeez.
It is a 70s. The back panel.
It's all the same company, so it's not. I mean, it's not like that unexpected.
Well,
so
the back panel isn't quite identical, but it's almost identical. They moved a couple of ports around.
Let's just be clear here. We have talked about gear on this podcast where I have specifically said, yeah, but it's super sexy.
Sure.
Right? They're like, past labs, Class C or Class A or whatever they call that thing.
Or something like the
Sim
subwoofers.
audio.
Whatchamacallit? The JL audio subwoofers.
JL audio
like
subwoofers,
that.
yeah.
Right.
I mean, these are products that I will never purchase. I just will never do it. I care too much about features and too much about money to just give a bunch of extra because the front plate is sexy.
I mean, I could go for speakers that are just cool looking, because if that means I get to position my speakers properly because the person I'm living with says, hey, those are actually cool looking and I don't mind seeing them, I'm like, That's a really good reason to maybe pay extra for looks.
Well, and not only that, I mean, there is something to be said for aesthetics, for sure. I mean, and if somebody comes to me and says, I bought this Macintosh because, my dad owned Macintosh, I've always wanted to own a Macintosh, and this has all the features I want, and it's a Macintosh.
Well, and they've got like those amplifiers with the cool VU meters on them, and if you just want those, all right, there you go.
That's great. I mean, you overpaid.
Thousands of dollars extra, but all right.
Yeah, you overpaid for the features that you got, but you feel like there's some value there, then knock yourself out. I've got no problems with it. That is the difference between this podcast and audiophile forums all over the net, is that you come to me and say, I bought this and I like it. Well, we're fine with you right there. We're not going to try to convince you that what you have is bad.
But if you ask us, did I get the absolute most bang for the buck? We're also going to tell you, no, you didn't. You didn't get the absolute most bang for the buck. So.
But you got the prettiest one.
There you
go. There's that. Hey, we've all done it. I've done it. I've done it tons, where I've gone out and I've bought something because, the marketing, or it looked a certain way, or it was in style at the time, or, whatever. And I've come home, and then after a few, weeks or months or whatever, I've gone, man, dude, I shouldn't have, this was a waste of money. I could have gotten so much more for so much less. Case in point, we got home theater seating. I mean, we spent quite a bit of money on a home theater setup, leather couches, everything back in Jacksonville. We had a love seat in the middle and 2 seats on the outside, cup holders and everything, blah, blah, blah. Got all that. And we never really enjoyed it that much. The kids mostly sat on their laps. They almost never sat in the side seats. No one ever wanted to sit on the side seats, and so everybody was always on the love seat portion of it. And the cup holders were kind of a disaster because the condensation gets in there, and then the little whatever that's in there gets all gooped up and moldy. You have to throw that out. Pretty soon you're putting paper towels in it, and we didn't have the stainless steel ones. We had like plastic ones, so it wasn't quite as nice as some of the other ones. So when we bought the couch that we have now, it is essentially just a very long couch where the whole thing reclines.
Yep.
And my wife looked over at me this weekend when we were all sitting on here, all together, all right next to each other, and looked over and said, this is the best thing we've ever purchased.
Yeah.
Simply because we went with functionality over aesthetics.
Yeah.
And I mean, the couch looks fine. It's a big gray couch, but it is nothing special. Nobody's going to walk in here and say, oh my God, that's a fantastic couch you have. No one's going to say that. They're going to go, look, yeah, that's a couch. That's all they're going to say. But functionally, it works really well. And that's the way I feel about AV gear. Now, aesthetics do play a part.
Sure.
For sure.
I think this is a little bit on Jonathan's part of, he's been a long-time listener. He's probably like, yeah, I'm hearing the same stuff come out of Tom and Rob's mouth an awful lot. Why don't you ever just, go off the beaten path, talk about stuff that's just plain cool? And I'm like, well, I mean, if somebody asks us specifically for that, we're question and answer. That's what we'll do.
That's what we do, man.
But it's not my milieu. I'm not just one for like, oh, just check out the latest, coolest thing. I'm like, no, that's that. You go to the forums for that. They'll give you plenty of that.
There are tons of podcasts out there or forums that will talk about the new hotness that's out there. We're not about that lifestyle. We're about
burned too many times by that.
How can we make your home theater the best for the least amount of money?
Yeah.
Steven. Steven has a 5.1 sound system in his study. It's 11 by 12 by 8 and enclosed. So it's a bedroom. He's using a B&W 705 S2 bookshelf front, left, and right speakers, a B&W HTM 72 S2 center, and a B&W M1 surround speakers, plus an SVS SB2000 sub. They're being driven by a NAD T748 version 2 receiver. His source is primarily his computer, which he has plugged into his NAD receiver via HDMI. He was happy using all 5.1 speakers for movies and games, but wanted to use just the front, left, and right, plus the subwoofer for 2-channel music, saying this listening mode to stereo work just fine and the music sounded good, but then he decided to follow some AV forums advice.
Yep.
Down the rabbit hole he goes.
Oh, and do we ever.
He connected an optical cable from his computer to his old external DAC he already owned, and he ran analog cables from that external DAC to his NAD receiver. He put the NAD into analog bypass listening mode instead of stereo, and lo and behold, he thought the music sounded better, richer, fuller, whatever audiophile word you like to use, but he preferred the sound this way. Since this advice from AV Forums seemed to pan out, he's now considering only more of their advice. In general, they want him to ditch the NAD receiver. They love spending your money, and get a dedicated stereo integrated amp. Why? And he wants to keep the surround sound receiver since he uses it for games and movies. So that being the case, the forum is suggesting that he get a dedicated integrated amp that he uses a home theater bypass mode so that he can use just the integrated amp for 2-channel sources, and then plug the pre-outs from his NAD receiver into his home theater bypass unit inputs, so he can continue using his front, left, right speakers as part of the surround sound setup. But those integrated amps seem to be quite expensive, especially in Australia where Steven lives. So the final idea is just to add an external 2-channel amplifier, but would anything actually be gained by using an external amp instead of the NAD's built-in amps? Steven just wants the best 2-channel plus subwoofer sound he can get when he's listening to music, but at a reasonable price and with maximum value. What do we advise? Okay.
So I gotta say one thing right off the jump, because he made it clear in his email. He's like, I want to use my front, left, right speakers and my subwoofer, because my front, left, right speakers are not full range.
Yeah.
And I want to, have my subwoofer playing as well when I'm listening to 2-channel music, so that I have, full range of frequencies. And yet he tried this analog bypass mode, which, guess what? The analog
bypasses your subwoofer.
Doesn't let you use your subwoofer. It turns off bass management, and your subwoofer wasn't playing. Yeah. So you have this incongruity of saying, I prefer this. And now nothing says you're not allowed to prefer the sound. All right, analog bypass turned off all of the processing that your NAD receiver is doing. You got no bass management. Your subwoofer wasn't playing any correction or EQ that the NAD was applying. That's not happening anymore. They have an analog tone control, so you could potentially boost the treble or boost the bass, or cut the treble or cut the bass.
In your bookshelf speakers alone, because it doesn't
in the bookshelf speakers alone. But that is the only thing. So what you're essentially saying is that you basically liked not having any processing applied. I mean, just subjectively,
right? You
kind of liked the way that sounded. But you didn't even notice that your subwoofer wasn't playing at all, because it wasn't.
It wasn't. So you have a very nice setup. So what you can do, instead of all the things that you have done, is instead of all this stuff that you've plugged in, all this extra garbage that you've done here, is just go to pure direct mode.
Yeah.
Go to pure direct and plug in a 2-channel setup, and you will get the same effect as having an external DAC and going to analog bypass.
Yep.
Pure direct will give you just your left-right speakers, no sub, no processing, no bass management.
That's right.
And now you're back to where you were, and you've spent zero money.
Yes.
But if you want your subwoofer to work,
and simplified your system back to,
what
back
you had
to the
before.
way you had it before, without the external DAC and all this extra cabling that's not required. Yeah. So first of all, I'm going to say you must do that. You must go back to just plugging in the HDMI cable and then switching the listening mode to direct, because we are not asking you to spend any money when you do that. And I'm saying you must do that to just hear for yourself that what you liked was just hearing your front, left, right speakers playing full range, no subwoofer, no processing, nothing being done to them, just untouched. That's what you like. Now, I am sure these guys got in your head. I am sure that if we hooked you up to an fMRI machine, that your brain might actually respond differently, even though the sound is identical. Because we're humans, that's what we do. We are susceptible to the power of suggestion.
I guarantee you could not pick out the difference between this analog bypass
if you did it
DAC
blind.
stuff.
If you
did it blind.
If you did an A/B comparison and did it blind.
Yeah,
we will guarantee you that you're not hearing a difference. Now, you are completely allowed to subjectively prefer having no processing, no bass management, no subwoofer, and that you like the way 2-channel music sounds when you play it that way. That's okay.
Yeah.
We're not going to tell you not to do that, but I would caution you. I always come back. So, I mean, this is why I am a crazy person, but I always come back to playing sweeps. Because if the sweep that you listen to is linear from top to bottom, you're hearing accurate sound. Now you go ahead and you leave everything that way where the sweep was linear from top to bottom, and you play your music and you listen to it and you go, you know what, I just prefer the way it sounds when it's not linear. That's okay, but you need to know that that's what's going on. You're completely allowed to prefer a colored non-linear sound. Completely allowed. But you need to know why it works.
Right.
Otherwise you can't convince yourself.
If, going back to this original thing. So basically, if you want to have the setup that you currently have, all you need to do is take away all the stuff you added and switch from whatever mode, stereo listening mode, to direct or pure direct or whatever they call it for the NAD.
Yeah, and they definitely have one like that.
They have one like that.
Stereo mode,
and it should sound the same as what you experience with the external DAC and everything else. If it doesn't, it's the problems between that hearing differences between your ears.
Could he have a non-linear external DAC? That's not utterly impossible, I suppose.
It's highly unlikely.
It's highly unlikely. It's not utterly impossible, but it's highly unlikely.
If that tells me one thing. You've got a single subwoofer right in here, if I remember correctly, a single subwoofer, and you preferred the sound for music of 2-channel music with just the
speakers playing full range, no sub play.
Which tells, well, first of all, he's got pretty decent speakers. So, I mean, they probably dip low enough where you're not missing a ton of bass. But it also tells me
they get into the low 40s, those speakers, easily.
So you're not missing a ton of bass to begin with, but it also tells me that maybe your subwoofer should be moved.
Yeah, it might not be optimally placed.
Because whatever that subwoofer's doing, or maybe I don't know what your crossover is set up, but whatever your subwoofer's doing, maybe is having detrimental effects in that frequency range.
This is where the whole thing, and you'll find this on AV forums very much, of the whole thing of your subwoofer shouldn't be playing for 2-channel music. It sounds worse, and it's like it can sound worse. That is entirely possible, but if it's optimally set up, it won't. You won't even notice. It'll just sound like your speakers just magically played lower. You're in an 11-foot by 12-foot by 8-foot room. You do not need an external 2-channel amplifier, especially not when you're only powering 2 speakers. Because I mean,
from like 2 feet away from your face,
with a NAD receiver. I mean, whatever we say about NAD, sometimes the ability of their built-in amplifiers to power 2 bookshelf speakers in an 11 by 12-foot room, that is no concern.
Yeah,
you do not need an external 2-channel amp.
Definitely don't need a 2-channel amp. You don't need to add any more gear to this. You need to
take some away at this
Take
point.
some away, go back to where you were before, and then start moving that subwoofer around until you get yourself into a situation. I'll guarantee you, if there's a desk, there's 2 speakers, and the subwoofer's right next to them.
Probably. Or under the desk or something.
Yeah, that's exactly where I would put it. I mean, most people do, because that's where you have space for it. But if this is a dedicated little space for you, putting it across the room from you or putting it on the opposite wall or in a weird space.
You got to do a subwoofer crawl.
You got to do a subwoofer crawl, man. You got to do the subwoofer crawl. All right, Robert wrote to us before with the following issue, but now he has more details. He has an Oppo 203 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. Good for you, dude. It plays all of his discs, including Dolby Vision, wonderfully. He has a Marantz SR6010 AV receiver. It got a firmware update to allow Dolby Vision pass-through a while back. He has his LG C6 OLED, 4K and Dolby Vision support, of course. He also has a 1080p projector. This is not the issue he's asking about, but no matter what he tried, he couldn't get 4K and HDR to work on his C6 OLED. If he also had his 1080p projector plugged into his Marantz at the same time, no combination of Marantz's 3 HDMI outputs would work, and no HDMI HDMI switch he has tried has worked. So he's resorted to having an HDMI extender cable plugged into the output of his Marantz. He then either plugs in the HDMI cable going to his OLED or plugs in the HDMI cable going to his projector. It's a bit of annoyance, but at least it works. Yeah, that's because of the HDCP handshake there. HDCP.
Yeah,
handshake.
And it's detecting that you have two different displays plugged in, one of which is 1080p only, and it's like, well, then you don't get 4K and HDR because it's lowest common denominator only. And he's well aware of that. But I did want to mention, I don't know if he'd already tried it. I don't know if I already mentioned it to him, but Sewell does have a little, like, mechanical HDMI switch. You can use it either direction, which also tells you that it's mechanical. You can either have, two sources going to one display or one source going to two different displays, and there's just a physical button that you click to choose which of the two HDMI on one side is connected to the one HDMI on the other side. It's like $30. What is the IBIS Pro is the full 18 gigabit HDCP.
Dude, for $30, I would totally buy this so that I don't have to switch HDMI cables.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a minor annoyance in that you have to physically walk over to the thing and click the button, but at least you're not physically unplugging and plugging cables every time. And it should do the trick because it's just like, it's now connected to this one or it's connected to this one, and never the twain shall meet.
All right, but he does have a problem with his Dolby Vision. So this is scenario one. I guess there's more than one. He puts a Dolby Vision disc into his 203, his Oppo 203. It plays just fine, but his OLED says no signal. He puts his Marantz into standby, and the video passes through the Marantz and shows up on his OLED in Dolby Vision. But of course, now he has no sounds. So he turns the Marantz back on. It's black for a few seconds, but then it all works. Dolby Vision, the audio, it's all okay from then on. Scenario two.
Weird.
Okay, so basically he's got to turn everything on, turn off the Marantz, and turn the Marantz back on in order to make everything work.
Strange.
So he puts a Dolby Vision disc into his Oppo 203. It plays just fine. He can hear the audio playing, but his OLED says no signal. Then at some random point, the image shows up in Dolby Vision, and it all seems fine from then on. So Dolby Vision does eventually work. Sometimes he has to power cycle his Marantz, but it does eventually pass through. It's certainly not 100% broken, but it's far from ideal. Any ideas? When he asked the last time, we said to make sure all video processing in his Marantz was turned off. Okay, that's literally the first thing that came to my mind. So it wasn't, and so he tried that, but it made no difference. And we said maybe his HDMI cables were right on the edge of not having enough bandwidth, but they all clearly say they support up to 18 gigabits per second. And it does play in Dolby Vision eventually, so what else could it be? He's using a Harmony remote to turn everything on with an activity, by the way. Well, your solution there is very simple. You're using a Harmony remote. You go into the activity and you delay the turning on of the Marantz until everything else is turned on and powered.
I mean, there was another thing, and he even sent in
a delay on that.
A little YouTube
that would
video.
Be my solution, because I can't imagine why this is happening. To be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, he did send in a little YouTube video showing the thing, and so he must have his Marantz.
Something is wrong with your audio. Like, you are now so quiet, I can't hear you at all.
Oh,
like, I literally cannot hear you.
I don't know. My levels are showing up on the thing. Yeah, it's something.
Like, you keep getting louder and softer and louder. It's not, now you are 1,000 miles away from me. I didn't even know you were talking. I thought you got disconnected.
I swear my audio level is remaining consistent, and the bars showing up in my Google Hangout are looking okay. So.
Oh, Jesus! It just got loud again. Jesus! Oh my God. Okay.
I was speaking at the same level the whole time. I don't know.
All right, I believe you. I'm just telling you that you went from. I mean, you've been going quiet, loud, but not like that. That was like I could not hear you. I had to go onto the picture to see your lips moving to know that you were speaking. Okay, so that was fun. Go on.
Talking to Robert anyway. He sent in a little YouTube video showing what was going on, and so he must have his Marantz set to standby pass through because otherwise the video wouldn't go through when he puts his Marantz into standby. I want, so first of all, why? Because I don't know why he would use, but I guess maybe sometimes he uses the OLED's built-in speakers, but definitely try turning that off because, so it goes into standby pass-through, whatever last source was playing now gets passively sent through the Marantz. You turn it back on, it takes a few seconds, it locks back onto the signal, it works, but if you just power everything up with the Harmony, it doesn't work. And I'm wondering if the Marantz got stuck on that last input,
Yeah, maybe.
Like there's a little bit of weird video switching going on because of that standby. I mean, this is grasping at straws here.
If he's not using the pass-through standby pass-through,
really using it,
if you're not using it, you should definitely turn that off.
Definitely turn that off.
But that's literally the only thing that either of us can think of, and I didn't even think of that as being. I mean, I knew he was using it because that's the only way that this works.
Yeah.
But if you're only using the same source, I mean, I guess he's not. He wouldn't be using the same source, so the standby pass-through could be an issue. And if that's the case, do you ever use just your OLED?
Yeah.
You know, do you ever use just your
Why
OLED?
Would you, I mean, it's the C6. It's the curved one, the last curved one they ever made.
Right.
Why would you ever use its built-in speakers? They're awful. But anyway, I'm grasping
nighttime viewing. You know, wants to keep it quiet. I mean, it's theoretical. There's a theoretical possibility of that.
But you can.
But if you're not using it, turn it off.
At night with the Marantz anyway. But yeah, try turning off the standby pass-through, because I mean, hey, if it works, it works. I can't even totally tell you to do the just connecting the video only output directly to the display and the audio only output directly to the Marantz, because he wants to be able to send the Oppo's output to both the TV and the projector, which I guess technically you could do if that's the only source you're sharing, but it's pretty inconvenient.
I guess what he could do is he could set his harmony to power everything up, and then power cycle, like after everything's powered up, power cycle his Marantz.
Sure.
Automatically. It would just add another 30 seconds or 20 seconds to your power up.
But I mean, you can change the order in which things turn on in your harmony activity. You can add delays to it, and that
if the Marantz is already locked into the other source, then that's not going to work, because that's what I initially said, which is delay the Marantz. But if it's locked into your Xbox or into a cable box or something,
but I mean,
like
you could say, turn on my TV first, turn on my AV receiver, put in a delay. Make sure that the AV receiver gets the command to go to the correct HDMI input, and then turn on the Oppo. You could program the harmony to do that. That might work.
I'm wondering if there's a cable box in here, and that cable box, which is always on, is the one that's messing this whole thing up. With it, it's always got that connection going for that standby pass through, and it's getting in an argument essentially with the Marantz, with the
turn that standby pass through off, man.
Yeah, that's probably your best bet here. We are going to have to. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I pushed a doctor. I had a doctor's appointment this morning, but I wasn't getting screwed by that guy again. So I pushed it back till after this podcast. But I need to eat lunch before I go, so we're gonna do a couple more questions, and then we
got 17, so we got to try and hit what we can.
We'll do what we can, dude. I'm not gonna cry about it. McMansion Kris. Kris is using an Epson 5040 UB projector and a Marantz SR7010 receiver. He recently purchased a Panasonic UB820 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. It's his first time using HDR on his projector, so we'd like to make sure he's got the best of settings set up. Anything you should change in his Marantz receiver to make sure the best video quality is being passed through? Yeah, don't make it do anything.
So on the SR7010, that's the same one I've got. Honestly, you just turn video conversion off, and that's all you need to do. On newer ones, Denon and Marantz models that came out after the 7010, they do have a video setting under the video settings there for 4K format. And you can choose either enhanced or normal. And there you do have to put it into enhanced in those ones. But the SR7010 didn't have that, so all you got to do is turn video conversion off and you're done.
So he's been using the Epson in cinema mode with the Eco Lamp option, pretty much the darkest setting in terms of light output, but it's always been plenty bright in his darkened environment. HDR looked too dark, though, and his Epson's pictures settings didn't seem to change when feeding it an HDR signal. So he tried the bright cinema picture preset, which looked quite a bit better with HDR. But what we'd recommend as far as settings for his HDR on his Epson? I'm sure there's some settings for that. Right.
So unfortunately, the Epson 5040 UB does not automatically switch into a different picture mode when it's being fed an HDR signal. It will change. So there's a one setting in the advanced setup called picture dynamic range, and that it will automatically go into an HDR dynamic range versus a standard dynamic range. That it'll do, but it will leave you in the same picture preset with all the same brightness and contrast and lamp settings and everything like that. So usually you do manually want to switch to a different picture mode. Now, over at projectorreviews.com, they put up their recommended settings for both an ISF dark mode, an ISF day mode, bright mode, and an HDR mode. And they've got all of those picture settings there. You want to go down to the bottom of their calibration settings page because they did an update. So the newest ones are at the bottom. But we'll have the link for that at avrant.com. Projector Reviews. It's actually the review of the 6040 UB, but they are identical, the 5040 and the 6040. So yeah, you can do that.
So given that the picture settings can be adjusted both on his projector and on his Panasonic player, he'd like to go through the Panasonic's settings to make sure he's outputting things the best way possible. So for resolution, should he do auto or pick a static resolution so that the player scales everything it plays? Maybe 1080p since the Epson is a wobble K. Yeah, I don't know.
Auto.
I mean,
this you want auto. I mean, unless you really want to scale things inside the player, but there's no real reason to. No, auto is fine for resolution. Auto.
So 4K 60p output, 444 or 420? Well, if you do 444, you're talking the full bandwidth, and you could be running into. I mean, I don't know what cable you've got. You could be running into issues that way. So, I mean.
Plus, the Epson 5040 UB cannot accept an HDR signal when it's 4K 60. It can only accept an HDR signal when it's 4K 24. Oh. So when it is 4K 60, this is a case. So even though they mention in the menus, they're like, if you set it to 420, it'll be limited to 8-bit. But I'm like, yeah, that's the case anyway. So specifically for the 5040 UB, you want 4K 60 frames per second to be 420.
All right. Advanced color mode, YCBCR or RBG. RGB, sorry. RBG.
OICBCR, and auto is fine for this.
Okay. Advanced deep color, 10 or 12-bit. Well, since it's going to be 8, I guess 10.
No, so it's a priority. 10-bit is what you want on this projector. Yeah.
Advanced HDR color gamut. He's assuming HDR BT 2020 since the other options are all SDR.
You are correct. The HDR BT 2020 setting. That's what you want.
Advanced HDR to SDR to HDR conversion on or off?
Off. Good God. Don't convert SDR to HDR. That's terrible.
Advanced HDR TV type 1 says it's for basic luminance LCDs and projectors. So that one, right?
Yeah, all the others are much too bright or asking the display to be much brighter than the projector can be. So you've got the right one. The one that says projector, amazingly, is for projectors. So
Dolby Vision and HDR 10 Plus. His Epson doesn't do either, but what happens if he leaves these on? Any harm?
I don't know. I would turn them off. You definitely don't have a display that can use them. I believe it would detect that and just, I don't know. I'm not sure. Since the Epson doesn't automatically switch into an HDR mode, I'm not super confident. Turn those off. Yeah.
Yeah, and audio should be in bitstream, right? What about secondary audio?
So secondary audio, if you have an Atmos or DTS:X setup, you need to turn off. If you leave secondary audio on, your Atmos won't work.
Ah.
Yeah.
The weird HDMI output settings of music playback setting, sound quality priority or normal.
Yeah, and it says it's going to down the resolution if you choose sound quality priority. I don't know how or why, because even at the highest bitrate audio possible, it's like a drop in the bucket compared to video resolution. I have no idea. I mean, it's all hokum anyway, so I would just turn that to normal. Why?
That's just a button they gave you to press just so you feel like you're doing something.
That's like the pure direct thing, man. That's hokum, just normal.
Bastian in Germany. First up, Bastian heard us discussing how to connect subwoofers to the KEF LS50 wireless speakers. He wanted to let us know that in the KEF app, there are expert controls that allow you to select the low-pass filter for the subwoofer output and the high-pass filter for the speaker, so a proper crossover is available, which is great for him since he doesn't use an AV receiver at all. Next, he got the SVS PC2000 sub we recommended. He was told that only 3 PC2000s are sold in Germany every year. People just aren't drawn to the cylinder. You guys are weird. No, whatever.
But no, that was good news about the KEF LS50 wireless, and thank you for letting me know that, because I didn't know that. And it's in the app. All right, you have to get the app if you want to do that, but at least it's there, and you can set up proper crossovers. That's good to know. That's great.
But he finds the form factor to be very helpful. This is of the sub, and he wound up not putting the sub behind his TV amongst his plants. Instead, it is right behind his sofa. What do we think about the placement he's chosen? Should he move it? How does it sound? Does it sound okay?
That is the key. I mean, aesthetically, it looks great. He's got a little teddy bear sitting on top of it. And
I
honestly,
can't see it.
So, I mean, this is the PC 2000, which, you know what? It's not, like, it doesn't look that big, right? Once you actually get it placed. That's why we love the cylinder, because it doesn't take up all this floor space. It's, like, a little bit taller than his low back couch.
I find it absolutely fascinating, people that are so against the cylinder subs.
Like, aesthetic doesn't so anyone who can see the YouTube video, doesn't that look better? Like, to me, that looks so much better and less obtrusive. It does. It doesn't even look like it is it looks like it's a little stand for something.
That's all it looks like, is a stand back there, and you could put this little teddy bear on there, and every once in a while when it vibrates off, he has to put it back on.
That's right. I think it looks great where it is. So if it sounds okay, it looks great to me.
He played a bass sweep, and it scared him the first time. He can make his whole apartment shake if he wants to, and it really has enhanced his movie experience. And also, shaking loose some stuff he didn't know was broke. He didn't need to know that he was fixing his house. He didn't do a subwoofer crawl. He just put the sub in a spot that was convenient and looked good once he had the sub in person and could appreciate the cylinder form factor. Should he bother with a sub crawl, or just leave well enough alone and continue having fun? Well, if you don't want to open up the can of worms that is the placement, and you're okay with how it sounds right now, I would leave it there. I from an advice standpoint, from just a functional standpoint, there might be a real reason for you just to leave it there and live with it for a while, and see how you feel about it. If you notice that every once in a while the sub gets super loud for no apparent reason, you're not going to notice that the suck outs. You're just not. They're just going to be. It's noticing
an absence of sound.
Yeah. Noticing a void is almost impossible. But you're going to notice every once in a while that everything's going fine, and then all of a sudden all the dishes in your kitchen start to shake, or something like that. And that's when you're going to know that you got an issue at whatever frequency that is. If you notice that happening, you might want to consider the subwoofer crawl. Now remember, the subwoofer crawl is not about every single possible space in your home, in your area, because this is a livable space. This is not a dedicated theater where you can place it wherever you want. And honestly, even in a dedicated theater, you can't place a subwoofer anywhere you want. There's seats there. There's walkways. There's, like, I'm not putting it in the middle of the room. I don't care what you say. So there are things to consider. So you just go, you play a sweep, and we've talked about Audio Check or whatever it is, where you can download your sweeps. You play a sweep, and you go to the different places. You put the sub in your seat, on your couch.
Yep.
Yes, your couch can handle your butt. It can handle that subwoofer. It's not that much heavier. And you will go to each area and see which one sounds the evenest, and that's where it ends up.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you already played the bass sweep at least once. We know that. So
you've got it.
Play it again. Does it? Do you hear it? Does it sound like a roller coaster in terms of volume? No, some parts of the sweep are way quieter. Some parts are way louder. If that's the case, I'd want to do a subwoofer crawl and move it. On the other hand, if you leave it where it is, you play the bass sweep, you're in your main seat, and you're like, well, there's like a little bit of up and down, but it's pretty good, pretty even. I'm like, yeah, you're done. Who cares? It's good. So the bass sweep will tell you.
All right. Clara. To be clear, Clara, I guess math. We're doing math here?
We're doing some math.
To be clear, Clara fully agrees with our general advice that for typical listening distances, say around 12 or 15 feet or less, bookshelf speakers being driven by any reasonable AV receiver are totally fine for the vast majority of people. But what about people who really, truly want to hit full reference volume? Let's take the RBH Impression Elite speakers as an example. They're rated 86 dB, 1 watt, 1 meter, which is pretty typical. They are rated as an 8 ohm load. They recommend 150 watts max power handling. If we consider a 4 meter listening distance, well within 12 to 15 foot distance that we say is no problem, then 1 watt should be resulting in 74 dB of output, using a loss of 6 dB for every doubling of distance to calculate that figure. We've mentioned how having walls instead of a wide open field means that we don't really lose quite that much output in real room, so maybe add back 3 or 4 dB, so 77 or 78 dB with 1 watt. You get 3 dB more output every time you double the watts, so or 10 dB more output every time you multiply the watts by 10. So just doing the math. To hit 105 dB, we're talking 512 watts or maybe 400 watts to hit 104 dB. Regardless, it seems like that's beyond the capabilities of these speakers in terms of power handling, and it's beyond what any normal receiver can deliver. Meanwhile, something like a Klipsch horn-loaded speaker with 98 dB sensitivity can easily hit 105 dB peaks using well under 100 watts. So no disagreement about our advice. The vast majority of people really will not ever need 105 dB output levels, but should we be more mindful and make sure we note the true maximum capabilities of the speakers and AV receivers we recommend? It's much worse for an amplifier to clip than to have more wattage than you actually need, right? So maybe super beefy separate amps are really a good idea, at least for people who genuinely want to hit full reference volume. So, okay, would they recommend 150 watts max power handling on that? And that is continuous.
Usually if they only give you one figure or they give you a recommended amplifier range, that will be continuous. And
that's not peaks.
Yeah,
that's not
some list specifically peak.
Right.
But if they're just giving you the range of recommended power amplifiers, amplifier power, then that's the continuous amount. And usually the peak is double that. There's almost always at least 3 decibels of headroom for a short transient peak. There's 6 decibels of headroom, but almost you can count on there being at least 3. So we can right away double that to 300 watts that it could potentially handle for a short transient peak.
Right. So, I mean, like I said, we've talked about what Clara here is saying is that, people who genuinely want to hit reference volume, should be recommending separates. Well, people who often are, first of all, whenever somebody says they definitely want to hit reference volume and they tell us their seating distance, we have told them before that you might want to consider an amp in this case with these speakers. That has happened.
Yep.
Definitely.
Or we have suggested higher efficiency speakers
right.
or very high power handling speakers. Yep.
Right. So that has happened in the past. So I feel like we are mindful enough of that. The fact of the matter is, it's very rare to have somebody want to sitting. People who sit further than 12 feet away from a speaker generally are in a room like a great room or and their first thing is, I know I'm never going to hit reference volume in here, and I don't want to because I would wake up the entire house. So you're asking us to say, well, if you want to hit for reference volume, you need separates. The people don't want to. Most people don't. I don't want to hit full reference volume 90% of the time. The last time I tried to hit full reference volume was Thor Ragnarok, and that's because that DVD's audio sucks. And that's not my fault. Yeah. I'm just trying to get it to be the right volume.
Because its full reference volume is like 75 dB, and there's no dynamic range on the thing. So,
yeah, it's awful. So you're right. There are cases where an external amplifier is warranted and things that we could mention, and we do. But frankly, it is the exception, not the norm. Most people from most speakers in most rooms who want to hit full reference volumes are like within 10 feet.
There's that, or it is a specific thing, in which case we do address the need for higher sensitivity or the need for more amplifier power. I guess it's the thing of when we're sort of casually saying this is fine, this is all you need, this is fine, right. And it's like, well, strictly speaking, maybe that's not true. Yeah, you're right. The numbers don't lie. The numbers are what they are. I do genuinely question a little bit how much sound we really do lose in real rooms, because it doesn't seem like we're losing anything close. We're definitely not losing 6 decibels every time you double the distance. You sit 12 feet away versus 3 feet away. It doesn't sound 12 decibels quieter.
Right.
There is no way at 13 feet versus 3 feet it sounds 12 decibels quieter from any speaker in any normal room. That is just, it has never been my experience that it sounds that much quieter. So I seriously question. I think it's very conservative to say that you're even losing 4 decibels for every doubling of distance when we're talking about the difference between 1 meter and 4 meters. Maybe once you start getting to 27, 30 meters away, makes a big difference. But
well, I mean that measurement, that statistic, that comes from an anechoic chamber where no sound is being reflected around. And even in the most dedicated home theater with the people who are crazy about sound absorption, they're only looking at 30-40% of that room being covered in room treatments that aren't as powerful as the anechoic chamber treatments are in there. So they're not even absorbing everything. much less all of it. And they have lots of reflective surfaces in there, and they're in a much a smaller room than you would think of for a measurement like this. Where
and then we also have the factor of even going strictly by the numbers, exactly by the math. 256 watts into those RBH Impression Elite speakers will get you 102 decibels. And we do know that they can, for a short transient peak, handle about 300 watts. And an AV receiver can deliver that kind of power for a very short transient peak. Sometimes they list the peak specification, and it's basically all the power that could be delivered into all of the all of the channels simultaneously can sort of be funneled into one channel. Not quite, but you basically take that plus a quarter of the rated power for each of them and put it all together, and that's like the power supply. So, I mean, those types of amounts, something like 250 watts, that is entirely doable for a normal AV receiver and these speakers. And that'll get you like 100% genuinely by the math around 102 decibels from 13 feet away. And the difference to our ears between 102 and 105 is really hard to notice. I mean, it's noticeable, but it's hard to... So, I mean, all of these things are adding up to... I'm like, I still don't say we're off the mark with our advice, because... But you're right. You're right. Strictly by the math, you're right. We need like 500 watts.
I'm telling you, man, these people who come to us and say, I want to hit reference volume, they get their speakers home, they get everything set up, and they're like, man, it's too loud. I don't think they sit there and watch at reference volume.
Plus, a lot of home movies have been remastered so that instead of being 85 average and 105 peak, there's 75 average and 95 peak. And if those are the figures they're going for, 95 instead of 105, oh boy, is that a whole lot less wattage that you're requiring. Yeah. So, yeah.
All right, last question here. Cool. Teemu from Finland. Teemu has a 3-KEF R100 speakers as his L, C, and R, his left, center, and right speakers. The left and right are 8.5 feet apart, and they form an equilateral triangle with his listening position. That's the golden triangle, according to audiophiles. He's got them pointing straight forward at the moment, and he wants to know if he should toe them in instead. He knows we're just going to say, just try it. But he knows his own personality, and if he just tries it, it's never going to end. He will end up ruining his enjoyment of the next 20 movies he watches just because he'll constantly be thinking about the toe-in and stopping to adjust it if trial and error is the only approach. So is there a strict step-by-step procedure he can follow that he can get exactly the right toe-in and then never have to question it again? Please help him put his mind at ease.
Well, there's going to be some trial and error.
There's going to be trial and error. So the way that I do this, and you do you, but Rob's going to tell you to play sweeps because Rob's a weirdo. But
pink noise actually in this case. But
well, that's so much weirder. But what I do is there's a specific track that I listen to which has a pan. Okay, it pans left. It pans from right to left and then back to right. All right. So I point the speakers directly forward like you have them.
So straight forward, no toe-in at all. That's where you start.
I play that little part of that track. I listen to it. I listen to how far left it goes, how far right it goes, and whether or not there's any gaps in the center.
Right. It should sound seamless in its pan from left to right. There shouldn't be a gap or a weird change in tone or something.
Then I point those speakers towards me.
Like right at
my face.
On axis at you.
Then I play it again. I see how far right it goes, how far left it goes, and how it pans across the center. Now, I expect that when they're pointed straight out, it's going to be the widest left to right, and there may be some gaps in the center. I expect when it's pointed directly at me, it's going to be the narrowest left to right, which means the sound stage has been narrowed, but it's going to be seamless all the way across. What I'm looking for...
That isn't 100% the case every time. But
no,
that's the expectation. Yep.
That's my expectation. If you got like old Atlantic Technology speakers from Vance, what's
Dixon?
His name?
Yep.
Dixon. You point them right at you. You point them straight out. They sound exactly the same.
Right. Or
there's like no difference. So everyone pointed them straight out.
Those Hue, the CC8 ones, with the throat, the narrow weird. What is that called? Compression tweeter.
No, the compression tweeter,
that's
right.
down the middle of the driver where they're actually like, these are never meant to be listened to directly on axis. And in fact, you should toe them in so much that if there were, lines coming out of them, those lines would cross in front of you. And that's their recommendation. is to have them that kind of off-axis. Off-axis
So
to the
okay,
outside.
let's back up then. First thing you want to do is go to the KEF website and see where they say you should, or your manual, see where they say that you should point these things. Then I would do the 2 things I said, and then if you find that there's, that the straight ahead has an even across the middle and the wide is just fine, and then when you point them towards you, the even is still the same across the middle, but the wide is in, I'd point them straight out. If you find that when they're straight out, there's a blank in the middle, but when they're pointed towards you, there's no blank in the middle, but they're narrower, you're going to start towing them back out again until you get as wide as you were when they were straight out, but there's an even pan in the center. To me, that's how I do it.
That's some trial and error, but
it is trial and error, but it's the same thing over and over again until you're done, and then you're done.
It's listening to one thing playing, this panning left to right, right to left.
Watching movies or listening to music is not the way to do this.
No, yeah, don't try to evaluate this with real content. I mean, that's the end result, is that you'll play your real content. But yeah, you've kind of got to use some kind of test pattern, test tone. So my approach is a little bit different. I play pink noise out of one speaker, because these are all identical speakers that you're using here. I play pink noise out of one speaker. I put myself physically about 1 foot away from that speaker, right in front of it. My ear's right at the same level as the tweeter, and I'm right in front of that speaker, and I listen to that pink noise for a little bit, and then I move a little bit off axis, and I don't worry if there's an immediate little bit of change in the tone or timbre of the pink noise, because that's very often the case, is that bang on axis sounds a tiny bit different from just a tiny bit off axis, but then it's very consistent to a greater degree off axis from that point. So that would be like the HSU speakers. They tell you right up front that's going to be the case. They're like, don't listen to these speakers bang on axis. You always want to be off axis. So that I get that sound, just a teeny bit off axis, left and right, up and down. And then I continue to move myself farther left, farther right, farther up, farther down, keeping us always about a foot away from the speaker. But I move myself, and that lets me hear with the pink noise when the tone and timbre of that pink noise changes. And that lets me visualize like a cone of sound coming out of the speaker. And then I simply want that cone of sound that I'm visualizing coming out of that speaker to cover all the seats that I care about. I want all my seats within that cone. So I kind of, can go behind. You can put some, tape that won't mar the finish of your, your sticky notes or something like that to visualize the angles up and down, left and right that are coming out of that speaker, which on your KEF R100 should be very, very even in all directions. Right. That's the way that design works. You got that cone, all your seats within that cone, and you're done.
I wouldn't be surprised if the way that you have those speakers set up right now is pretty close to where you'll have them at the end. But
well, because the KEFs have such even wide dispersion that you can aim up just about anywhere. They don't sound drastically different in their image.
I wouldn't be surprised if you end up right back where you started.
Yep.
All right. Who do we have left, Rob?
We have Travis D, Mark T, John B, and breaking the rhyming last initials, Brandon N. There you go. That's everybody on our list.
We want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank all of our all of our entrants to the giveaway, especially the ones who entered this week, which was Travis, Mark, Gary, Juan, Jonathan, Steve, Todd, Bastian, Matt F, Matt C, Kris, Yannick, John, Brandon, Peter, and Vincent.
And for once, I won't repeat all the names because we're running low on time, but thank you all very much for entering, and huge thanks to James, House of Cards James, because he wants to name a nickname. There you go. Thank you very much for the yeah, I know Tom's like, House of Cards. House of Cards has become a house of cards. It is falling down.
It is falling down. We also want to thank our 84 patrons at patreon.com.
Yeah, patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you'd like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, thanks to our 84 patrons.
Lastly, let's thank Joe for talking us up to Outdoor Speaker Depot.
Oh, yes, Joe, thank you very much for talking us up, and congrats on all that stuff you purchased for, I believe it was an office building.
Sounds great. For AVRant, I'm Tom Antry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.